can go ahead and call to order the Tuesday, March 19th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. You can call the roll.
Mr. Kenton.
Aye. I said yes.
Mr. Patinos. Ms. Austin.
Here.
Ms. Marshall.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Willis.
Here.
Ms. Fuller.
Here.
And Chair Townley.
Yes. Do we have a motion to approve the March 5th, 2019 minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Daryl. Do we have
Second.
a second? Second from Michelle. Any comments or edits? Any discussion on the minutes? I don't see any. Call the vote.
Okay, Mr. Kenton.
Yes.
Ms. Austin.
Yes.
Ms. Marshall.
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Willis.
Abstain.
And, Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
And Chair Townley.
Yes. Okay, next we have public forum. This would be an opportunity to bring forward any discussion that is not related to the public hearing that's on the agenda tonight. Do we have any public that would like to speak? Don't see any? Okay, thank you. So we will now move to public hearing, ZON 2017-004, Alta Inglewood Station, PUD. We have a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Mr. Kenton.
Aye.
Ms. Austin.
Yes.
Ms. Marshall.
Yes.
Ms. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Willis.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
And Chair Townley.
Yes. And can I just do a quick overview of what we'll be doing? So we've opened up our public hearing. We'll have a presentation from the staff, presentation from the applicant, an opportunity for public testimony, any final statements or rebuttal from staff and applicants. We'll close the public hearing, and then we'll have a motion, have some discussion, and take a vote.
I want to state for the record that I have received proof of publication and posting. Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission? Please state your name.
Wade Burkholder, Planning Manager, Community Development Department. Okay. Good evening, Chair Townley, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I'm going to provide you with a short presentation, basically overview of what has happened since the last public hearing. The applicant will go into much more detail, as you'll see as I work through mine, on the questions from City Council that they posted to you all during their public hearing for further consideration. So once we get into that discussion, if you have any more questions for me, I'm happy to pop back up at that time. But the site overview you're familiar with, it's currently zoned I-1 light industrial. It's 4.22 acres, and it is bound on the north by the CubeSmart property at the Hamden and Jason intersection, and to the south by Earthtrex at the Jason and, what is that street? Kenyon Avenue. The green shading in the middle is the 4.22 acres. It is currently today parking, and the property has previously been subdivided, so each one of those lots are now separate from one another. So the CubeSmart's on one parcel, this is one parcel, and the Earth-Trex building is one parcel. The Planning and Zoning Commission approved by a 6-0 vote the PUD district plan on October 16th, 2018 with 2 conditions. The first is that that a detailed traffic and station access study be conducted, and secondly, that the district plan is approved as proposed. Any material changes to the plan as determined by staff requires further review by the commission. City Council held its public hearing on this application on December 17th, 2018, and its first reading of an ordinance on January 22nd. And on January 22nd, by a vote of 6-0, Council voted to send this application back to Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss the list of comments, questions, and concerns, which are found as attachment E in your packet materials this evening. So the project overview, 316 units for 79 dwelling units per acre ratio. That's 4-story multifamily complex wrapping a 5-story parking structure. The proposed uses under the PU district plan have been modified based on what the underlying I-1 zoning currently is. The applicant has taken out a lot of the heavier uses, maybe more controversial uses such as marijuana, retail stores, adult-based business stores out of their proposal for this plan. The PUD district plan is essentially required to go through this PUD process because of the multifamily use on the parcel. Multifamily residential is not a use by right within the I-1 normally, so they have to go through this alternative zoning process to get that correct use on this parcel. The height limitation on the new PUD district plan is 70 feet. The majority of the building is much less than 70 feet. It's coming in right around 50 feet. There are areas where the elevator shaft is going up to approximately 65 feet. There are some parapets on the roof that are approaching that. So they brought their requested height down from 100 feet, which was a part of the original PUD, to now 70 feet. There is a conceptual rendering of the building included in your packet materials. Has been a lot of discussion about the district plan, which is before you tonight for recommendation, versus the concept site development plan, and why the 2-step process. First of all, the zoning code, Unified Development Code, allows for the 2-step process per the developer's choice. So that was the choice that they set in on. And I wanted to, you have the concept site development plan in your packet tonight, but I also at your desk included for you to look at what's required by the planned unit site development plan. And I included this because I wanted to show you that there's really not a lot of difference between what you have tonight and what a final site development plan would look like. You know, there are things like the final drainage, the final utility reports, the final landscaping plans that are all required under the site development plan. And we're only in concept with this application right now. So I just wanted to make the point that, you know, what you have tonight is not all that far off from what a final site plan is going to be. And I want to make the point that all of those things would have to be met and signed off on before any kind of permit would be issued anyway. So the project is now fully parked according to the UDC. If you recall back to the first application, there were some waivers being asked for with regard to the number of parking spaces. There is a draft agreement in your packet that should this be approved, there will be a shared parking agreement filed with the CubeSmart property. And just as an overview of what the parking now looks like, in order to fully park the project, there would be 542 spaces required. And with the shared parking agreement, they would gain 82 spaces from that property in addition to the 445, I think I'm getting that number right, spaces that they would provide on their site. So they would be fully parked with that shared agreement. This does allow still the CubeSmart property to be compliant with the amount of parking spaces that they're required. Currently on that property, there's 105 parking spaces. And again, Alta Englewood Station would take up 82 of those. CubeSmart is required 22 spaces, and there'd be 23 left. So they would still be compliant with the number of spaces they have. Again, the multimodal study, which was a part of your original request, has been completed. It's submitted, and the applicant will be going into more detail with regard to what that says and some of the things they're looking at there. I will let you know that the city and the applicant are discussing what that study has come back with, and there will likely be some agreed upon projects that are off-site that will help with ADA compliance and the route to and from transit stations and things like that. So in your original motion, we talked about if there's a material change determined by staff. So I wanted to go over what is a material change to this PUD district plan that would require it come back before you all for further discussion. A material change would be an increase in the number of units to more than 316, would be a decrease in landscaping area below 20%, or an increase in lot coverage above 80%. Would be a decrease in the provided parking below UDC requirements. And one point I wanted to make that there was a lot of discussion with planning and zoning and at city council about the on-street parking along Jason. I just want to note that the applicant doesn't control that on-street parking, but I do believe it's within your purview. If you want to make a recommendation that city council look at maybe signing that area, limiting the parking as an extra step so that that parking doesn't get overused. But as of right now, as I mentioned, the site is fully parked, or the project's fully parked, and it doesn't rely on that on-street parking at all any longer. Another material change would be if the overall building height went above 70 feet. Material change would be a proposed use that's not otherwise listed in their district plan table of uses. And again, just wanted to reiterate that the final drainage, utility reports, off-street improvements, easements, parking agreements, landscaping details, lighting, all of that's part of the final site development plan. All of that is required of the applicant anyway, should they get an approval with this district plan to move forward. So the planning staff is recommending approval of the PUD district plan, and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation would proceed again to City Council. Just wanted to mention that your findings of fact should be really as detailed as possible when addressing questions from City Council that were sent back to you, so we can have a good record of that dialogue. Again, I haven't went into any of those specific questions because I know the applicant will talk about those in detail with you all. So I'm here to answer any questions now or later on.
I have some questions. Parking. So I understand that you're saying the project is fully parked according to the UDC, but for a PUD, we can use the underlying zoning, or we could use multifamily development as a guideline to develop a parking minimum for the site. So I would say that, I'm thinking in terms of the material change, that instead of referring to the parking in the UDC, it should be referred to the parking plan within the
In
PUD.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
Let's see. Procedural question, I guess. With the list of permitted uses and then the site plan for the PUD.
Yes.
So if it's a list of permitted uses and say the applicant decides not to go multifamily residential, then what happens?
There would be no need for a PUD, so they could build those uses by right under the current zoning. Now, if the PUD went through, the district plan went through, that's what would rule the property. That's what would be the guiding document of the property. So those parameters would be set for any other use.
For any other use, so, but the actual site plan type documents and things like that are specific to one use of the site.
Yes.
But other uses could potentially be developed.
If the multifamily would not occur, yes.
Okay.
You know, the applicant is really trying to streamline the PUD district plan to really honor the multifamily use that they're planning to do. They're trying to take that uncertainty out, so that they've worked a lot on that since the first go-around, so that they are aware that that's been a part of the concern.
Sure. Does anyone else have questions right now for Wade? Daryl, did you have one, or?
Yeah, if I can get the microphone. Yeah, I was just wondering, is there any substantial ways that you see that this deviates from the original proposal? I mean, obviously, the transportation plan has been done.
I think it does deviate from the original, yes, in terms of the height requirement.
Okay.
It's down from 100 feet. You know, the landscaping still meets the UDC code. The parking has been addressed. That was a huge issue. There's always going to be somewhat of a debate, a philosophical debate about the two-step process, yes or no. There was a lot of concern at City Council about compliance with the comprehensive plan. I think you'll hear a lot of evidence to the fact that this proposal does meet the comprehensive plan in many ways. Staff would agree with that on many different fronts. And, you know, I think the applicant has really gone to a lot of effort to involve the community more, again, since the City Council meeting. So they've heard from the public. They made attempts to reach out to every person that spoke at the City Council public hearing in opposition. So they wanted to get that dialogue going. So I think it's a much, to me, it's a much tighter application than it was before. You know, I think the intent is that, yes, it's a multifamily development project, and they're trying everything they can to show you that that's their intent. And I think with the multimodal study, with some of the other improvements that could potentially happen, I think it's a benefit.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot of good things in the multimodal study. The one thing that I did see, and maybe there was more, and maybe we're going to talk more about this, is you talked about them allowing for a connection to the multimodal trail, which I understand is not funded yet, but I mean, has it been looked at ways that can be further, obviously, it's a huge benefit to them to have that multimodal trail actually exist.
You know, they are still proposing the connection from their property directly to the multi-use trail there.
Right.
There hasn't been, it's a difficult conversation because that trail hasn't been designed, so what's the nexus for this project to the trail? So it's hard to come up with an ask on the city's behalf at this point in terms of what that means.
Okay. That's where we're at. Thank you.
I saw there are 316 units proposed, but I was wondering if there was an expected, once the property is full, an expected occupancy rate or count?
The applicant may have a better answer for that.
Okay.
I don't want to state a number. I think I heard a number from them once, but I'd rather have them answer that.
Okay, thanks.
On page 6, it says additionally discussed was the Parks and Rec Master Plan, depicting the property as an opportunity zone for park. And then it says with the added density this project proposes, the amenities provided on site will need to act as a self-contained park for the residents to enjoy, but that's not addressed in any other part of the document, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to that.
Well, they're proposing to have an on-site pool for the residents, open space for the residents. The meaning behind that statement is there's not a park immediately adjacent, so they're going to have to make that amenity within their own project for the residents.
And does it appear that there's enough space to provide that
Yes.
amenity?
Yes.
Okay.
Wait.
Swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you would tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Please state your name and address.
Dustin Jones, 2601 Blake Street, Denver. Fair enough. Trying to break it. All right. Members of Planning Commission, can you guys hear me okay? All right. Members of Planning Commission and staff, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you again about our proposed PUD. We are excited about the culmination of changes that we have made in an effort to address the community, the city council, staff, and this commission's suggestions to make this development something that everyone embraces. My name's Dustin Jones. I'm with Ogilvy Properties. We purchased the former Sports Authority headquarters site in spring of 2017. And what we're proposing, as mentioned earlier, is the establishment of the PUD to allow for a multifamily, trying to get this working, to allow for establishment of a multifamily use on 4.22 acres of our overall site. Simultaneously, we're proposing a multifamily development in conjunction with Wood Partners for 316 multifamily units. Although this PUD was recommended for approval by a unanimous vote by this Planning Commission, City Council asked that we address a few concerns which we will present tonight. Given that there are quite a few new faces on the Planning Commission, we'd like to recap some of these items pertinent to the proposal and then specifically address the concerns that were raised by City Council later. As this timeline shows, let me get pulled up. We'll flip around a little bit. All right. As the part of the half the timeline shows anyway. This process began really 2 years ago when our pre-application meeting kicked off. Over the process, we will have had 4 neighborhood meetings, which doesn't include our community outreach meetings, 7 submittals to city staff, 7 DRT meetings with staff, 2 Planning Commission public hearings, 2 public City Council hearings, and nearly 2 years overall of opportunity for stakeholder input. Although this process has taken 2 years to get to this point, the market demonstrated what the highest and best use was really from the beginning. It was evidenced by the strong interest we received from the multifamily development community well before we were even under contract on this site. The interest was really the result of the location of this site in between 2 light rail stations with nearby retail amenities. You can see the light rail stations on that slide. And the central nature of this location relative to the entire metro area. Some of the many advantages that this development brings to the Inglewood community is that it creates a tremendous economic benefit for the city of Inglewood and its residents, not only through the direct fees that it'll generate, but really by the economic impact to the surrounding retail and the community overall. This project completes the highly desired live, work, play environment on a transit-oriented development site. We have retail currently, office, industrial, entertainment, and with this missing piece, residential, all in one development. The development has worked with all stakeholders, Planning Commission, City Council, staff, residents of Inglewood, Inglewood businesses, to incorporate the community's desires for this development over the past 2 years. Although this is a great development for the ideal location, it took a process to get to this point. There were many items that the owner, us as the owner and Wood Partners as the developer, addressed in order to make this a great development. As you can see from the chart above, some of these included and were mentioned earlier. We reduced the maximum building height by 30%. We created a setback where there was not previously one required. We created landscaping requirements for the site which were not previously required. We limited the number of units for the multifamily, produced multiple vehicle and pedestrian traffic studies and reports. We've dedicated a substantive amount of land to allow the proposed development to meet the city parking code, which is largely intended for suburban locations. And we spent significant resources developing a design that is far more developed than a typical project that's not currently zoned for the allowed use or for the intended use. We've already installed a $300,000 water quality improvement on our adjacent property. As you will notice, we have highlighted several of these items at the bottom in a different color there that will address the particular suggestions that were raised by City Council and the community in the last meeting. This is why we actually requested the City Council refer this back to the Planning Commission so that we could address these concerns and create a great development for the great location. And I'll hand it over to Wendy at Norris Design to talk a little bit in more detail about these items. Thank you.
My name is Wendy Birchler, 1101 Bannock Street, Denver, Colorado, 80204. Thanks, Dustin. And good evening, everyone. My name is Wendy Birchler, and I am a planner and landscape architect with Norris Design. I, along with Marcus Pochner, will be, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let me start over. I, along with Marcus Pochner, am going to address these 6 concerns that we heard from Planning Commission as well as our City Council hearing. It's next slide for you guys on your, sorry about this thing, but if you guys switch your sheet, you'll be able to see those. So City Council questioned why the 2-step process was acceptable to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And based on the initial staff report from that hearing, the 2-step process was acceptable to Planning Commission because it complies with current code. And this process also relies on the expertise and experience of the city staff. Going to the next slide here. The applicant, Ogilvy Properties and Wood Partners, want to be completely transparent, share as much information as possible, and provide certainty to Englewood residents, staff, Planning Commission, and City Council that the proposed development has parameters with limited ability to change. These parameters were derived from direct discussions with City Council members at the public hearing. In order to provide more detail and bind the proposed development to a site plan, Wood Partners has developed additional details for a site plan that was submitted as part of this revised PUD district plan submittal. These plans limit our building height, unit count, and stipulate that the required parking will meet the city's UDC. Next slide if you guys want to go through that on your copy. Finally, the PUD district plan now requires that certain deviations from the site plan would require the PUD to come back for approval before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. This was a specific topic of discussion with Council, and the applicant wants to provide parameters that, if deviated from, would require additional review and approval based on those concerns. The deviations include an increase in the building height above 70 feet, an increase in the unit count over 316 units, a decrease in the landscape area below 20%, or an increase in the maximum building coverage, lot building coverage above 80%, or a decrease in the provided parking below the parking required by the UDC. Next slide. Wood Partners has spent significant additional funds to provide more detailed plans that meet many of the requirements of a full site development plan submittal that included the following: building plans for each floor, a detailed parking layout, a civil site plan with utilities, landscape plan, and a 3D model showing the building form, massing, siting, and height. Effectively, we are aspiring to provide the same development parameters and public certainty that would be provided if the rezoning and site plan were pursued concurrently. Further, we built in a mechanism that will trigger review by Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council if any of the respective parameters are changed. Next slide. Oops. Shoot. Sorry, guys. It ain't gonna happen. I'm glad we brought hard copies. We don't always do that, so sorry about that. In accordance with concerns that we heard from City Council and the community, we have revised our plans, and we are now parking the multifamily uses to code per the UDC. The parking ratios for the PUD district plan have been modified to achieve the parking ratios requested at the City Council public hearing. The proposed plan with 316 units provides the 542 spaces as required by code. Next slide. Ooh, I almost got that one. The council also expressed concerns regarding the loss of industrial land that would result if this rezoning is approved. This site hasn't had traditional industrial uses on it for at least 30 years. It has been retail and office, but never actually industrial. While we are proposing multifamily on a 4.22 acre parking lot, the site we are talking about is not a redevelopment of an industrial use. It is a vacant parking lot. We are not taking away an industrial building, but rather adding to a mix of uses that include retail and entertainment, showroom, office, storage, and hopefully multifamily. Next slide. The multifamily residential use proposed is consistent with several goals and objectives in the Englewood Forward 2016 Comprehensive Plan. As a planner and a landscape architect, these goals and objectives are very influential. They help us make good planning decisions when we are preparing plans that propose a land use change. We made sure that they are in alignment with the vision the city developed through the comprehensive plan. As you can see on this slide, there are many goals and objectives that our proposed project is consistent with, and I'm going to go through a few because they are important. Providing a variety of housing meets goal Live 1. Promote a balanced mix of housing opportunities serving the needs of current and future Englewood citizens. These homes will accommodate those who are new to living on their own, pre-home ownership, and those who choose to downsize after their nest empties. The project will help balance the city's recent attraction of luxury multifamily communities with its abundance of older single-family homes to improve choice among Englewood residents. The multifamily use also meets goal Live 3, recognize and enhance the relationships between land use and the transportation system. Alta Englewood Station is within walking and biking distance of the Englewood and Oxford light rail stations, 0.4 and 0.6 miles respectively. The proximity to transit promotes the use of the bus and rail system and provides first and last mile connectivity. The project also provides 158 parking spaces for residents, or 1 space per 2 units, in compliance with the Unified Development Code. Pedestrians and bicycles can safely access the Englewood Station and the Oxford Station. In addition, an off-street trail connecting both stations with a pedestrian bridge over Hamden Avenue is planned to be implemented by the City of Englewood as shown in the Walk and Wheel Master Plan and Program. The proposed site plan provides a clear connection point to that future trail access. Finally, an immersion of dense residences in proximity to these light rail stations will support the area's existing mix of uses, including civic, cultural, retail, healthcare, office, and industrial, increasing the retail base, access to services and amenities, and opportunities to live close to work. This multifamily project will be the first infusion of residents to the immediate area and is only allowed within this 4.22 acre PUD district. The surrounding area remains within the industrial I-1 zoning and will continue to provide employment opportunities and manufacturing space. In fact, 2 new showroom warehouse users are planning to open east of Earth Tracks. All of these contribute to objectives LIV 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. The multifamily use also achieves goal SHOP 2, capitalize on the unique characteristics and associated opportunities for enhancing the value of Englewood's commercial and mixed-use districts. By integrating residents into the area, Alta Englewood Station will enhance the vibrancy of the surrounding areas, creating places where people connect and reflect upon their shared experiences. This project will add to the distinctive character of the adjacent station areas and help create a complete neighborhood in conjunction with Objective SHOP 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. There are 3 additional items that we heard were concerns. Marcus Pochner is going to discuss how our team has addressed these.
Raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission? Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Marcus Pochner. My address is 130 Rampart Way, Suite 225, Denver, Colorado, 80230. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm here as a consultant to Wood Partners, and I'm honored to speak to you this evening. I'm going to try to go to this next slide here. Wendy just detailed 3 of the 6 issues that City Council asked for further analysis. She clarified that we wanted to provide a predictable and accountable approval process, that this project is parking to the UDC, we are parking to code, and that the proposal unequivocally reflects the comp plan. I will now cover the next 3 topics. The next component of the vision for this site focused upon transportation and the necessity to provide efficient multimodal access and connectivity to the site. Frankly, this was a specific request by the P&Z, and we want to thank you for asking us to complete a multimodal study for the proposed development. That study is attached and in your packet. In doing so, our consultant evaluated the existing parameters for this. We looked at existing pedestrian facilities. One would access the Englewood Station. We looked at RTD bus service lines around the site. We looked at, of course, the light rail station. We looked at Osgood Station. We looked at the future rail trail connections, and we also looked at bicycle and pedestrian routes. Specifically, we looked for comprehensive multimodal improvements that could be enhanced because of our proposed development. The on-site recommendations and enhancements that we will be providing are listed on this slide. These are things that we will provide as recommendations from the multimodal study. We will have dedicated access to the future rail trail. We will provide electric vehicle charging stations. We will have integrated on-site amenities for bicycles, including a 24/7 repair station, and we will place bike, scooter, and car sharing stations adjacent to or near the site to encourage multimodal transportation. Next, and probably most importantly, and I'll try to walk through this as the slide goes, we looked at off-site multimodal enhancements. As Wade mentioned, we are going to work with city staff, and we have dedicated $60,000 for off-site multimodal enhancements. We will coordinate with city staff to best maximize these improvements. Here's a few examples of things that the study identified. We will provide improved bike route wayfinding, additional bike racks, and bike lockers at the Oxford Station. We actually identified specific curb ramps and drive reconstruction opportunities to bring the area into ADA and compliance, and we've listed those specific intersections, and we've also looked at specific sidewalk repairs that need to happen in the pedestrian realm. That's the rest of the list of those. Again, we will coordinate with staff on improving these. We've dedicated $60,000 to these improvements. Additionally to that, when you look at multimodal transportation, one of the things that we have to do is we also have to remember the vehicle part of this. We think it's important to look at that balance, and we must continue to meet the traffic requirements for this site. I just want to remind everyone of the previous submittal that we submitted a full traffic report that was submitted, reviewed, and approved by the City of Englewood Public Works staff. Those studies were fully based on scoping requirements by the city, and we looked at existing roadway conditions surrounding the pro-development, and it was determined they have capacity to serve the district plan uses, including the self-storage facility, the 316 units, and the climbing gym. I think one thing that is also very important is to also understand that we needed to look at the additional kind of the neighborhood realm, to look at that on-street parking that has been mentioned a few times. Based on the concerns of neighbors and city council members, we actually did supplemental parking studies, were commissioned by the applicant to determine the available on-street parking during peak business hours and peak evening hours. So within this defined area, we actually looked at 2 different times during the day to do this study, and 1 time in the evening when EarthTrex is busiest. We coordinated with them. There are 157 parking spaces available in this parking area, and as you can see here, daytime parking vacancy showed approximately 58%, and evening parking vacancy is approximately 97%. I want to be very careful with those numbers, though, and we share them cautiously. There is neighborhood on-street parking available, but in no way are we advocating that our project should then occupy those parking spaces. We want our neighborhood businesses to thrive. We want them to have ample parking. That's an absolute another reason we are parking to code. In fact, as Wade mentioned, we would readily support additional on-street parking limitations. No overnight parking, parking restrictions, hour parking restrictions, anything that the neighborhood or the city would suggest to minimize any negative impacts on the surrounding neighborhood. As we transition from the multimodal study and look at the infrastructure improvements, I'm going to see, I think this is the infrastructure improvements. There we go. All the utilities have provided will serve letters. We also worked, our engineers work with the city's engineers to look at similar projects and to work with them on the engineering staff on project-specific engineering calculations to make capacity determinations. It was determined that the existing water and sanitary sewer surrounding the project has capacity to serve the proposed development. Importantly, let's see if this gets us, the stormwater quality and detention will significantly improve the area drainage. This happens because we're going to provide water quality and detention facilities in accordance with the City of Englewood and urban drainage on a site where no such facilities exist today, a very large parking area. I must say, when we heard this question come up from council, anytime there is a question about existing infrastructure in a proposed development, implicitly there's an underlying question to that. There's an underlying assumption, and it's a completely fair question. That question is the proposed development paying its own way and providing necessary infrastructure for the development? Here are a list of the fees and taxes that we are paying for this site. We are going to pay on-site water main upgrades of $40,000. We're going to see, you can see the impact fees for both the water and sanitary sewer. We're going to pay a cash in lieu fee for park dedication of $121,000. As was noted in the planning staff report, that money likely will be set aside for the future rail trail. We are going to spend $1.6 million on a use tax fee. All in all, we are approaching $2.6 million that we will pay in city fees. And in addition to that, we'll give them multimodal improvements, and then we'll provide over $500,000 on an annual basis for our property taxes. So the utility, the water, the sewer, and stormwater infrastructure are being enhanced. Additionally, we are paying significant funds that Englewood may choose to spend on additional infrastructure or capital improvement projects. Next, I'm going to transition to the community outreach, which I was honored to lead. I do want to say this is the foundation of our planning, the community engagement that we had. We have had a comprehensive outreach plan and have remained steadfastly committed to garnering as much feedback as possible to really enrich this plan. Our focus of our outreach first started with our adjacent neighbors, then we looked at the surrounding encompassing district, and then the larger community. These are just a few examples of how we did each of those categories. With the neighbors, we had individual meetings to discuss the proposed development. We actually walked door to door to seek feedback. We introduced the project to them. We even held an informational booth at EarthTrex. In the district, we host informal meet and greets at the South Restaurant. We did 3 different flyers, 3 different luncheons, and we actually mailed the entire neighborhood as well. That was 95 people each time we did that. For the outreach to the larger community, these are the required community meetings. You can see the 3 dates that we've had. Probably most importantly, we've asked city staff, and we will do another one of those if we're fortunate enough to have your support between now and the city council hearing. Importantly, as we kind of look at this culmination of the community touch points, that outreach has continued since the last city council hearing. We've hosted another luncheon, we met with all the adjacent neighbors, and we reached out to anyone who testified at either of the hearings to garner feedback about the proposal. Uniquely, we have had now 856 unique community interactions on this site. Those are unique interactions, and we have totaled those to have 856 interactions with the community. We are immensely proud of this outreach, but most importantly, this outreach has made the project significantly better. In fact, as I go to this 2-slide view, and I transition to our final slide, this project is immensely better because of the process we have gone through. It is better because of the community engagement, because of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and by City Council. This process has led to the following improvements, this chart that you have seen. We are limiting the building height. We are enhancing the design standards. Our unit count is now 316 units. A 2-step process has been transformed into an approval process that is predictable and specific, requiring delineated material changes to come back to City Council. We must build what we have submitted. That's the bottom line. We have to build what we have submitted, or it goes back to City Council. We are parking to code. The site plan absolutely springs forth from the comprehensive plan. We are providing specific on-site and off-site multimodal improvements. Our infrastructure requirements are being met or exceeded. And most importantly, we listened to our community. They said park it to code, and we are parking it to code. This process has allowed us to frankly step back and look at the site more holistically. Each one of these improvements are important, but together, these collective improvements create a formal crescendo for the project. We respectfully request that you join staff in supporting our application. Thank you very much. There's the last half of that. And we're here. We have a full team for any questions you may have.
I have questions. First one's about parking, whoever wants to take that one. I realize that this is a conceptual plan, but do you have a general idea of how much it costs per space to build the structured parking that you have proposed?
We have a full team. Sorry to look at each other for this first one.
That's
We're going to bring our architect up to answer that question.
Sure.
And I'm going to stay right here in case we have other questions.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission? I do. If you could go to the podium and please state your name and address.
I'm Kathy Parker with Studio PBA Architects. My address is 1575 Gilpin in Denver.
Thank you.
The parking structure is a precast structure, and it's fully surrounded by apartment buildings, so you don't see the parking structure. And it's about $23,000 per space is kind of the budgeted cost for that structured parking.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate that. And in your application that you submitted in the past, you had a parking ratio of 1.3. You've increased that to 1.5 per the typical multifamily requirements in the UDC. Do you feel as though that's going to be too many parking spaces? Or if that is too many parking spaces, what can you do with that available area within your site?
You're leading me into dangerous area there on that question. I think that we heard loud and clear that we should park this to code. And so I think we look specifically at just the UDC. And you're right, and you asked that question earlier. We looked at what it said for studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and the 7 3-bedroom units that we have on the site. So we are parking to code. I think there's a lot of opinions about could it be reduced. I think this should and will act as a transit location, but we're going to have sufficient parking. We're probably over parking that site, but I think that's frankly something that probably has to happen in this instance to really help make that transition. And I think we're proving up those pedestrian and bicycle connections to really make those stations work. So all in all, it's the right thing to do. I will say that I think the shared parking opportunity was really important to the site because not only the costs, and I want to be sure that certainly is an important factor, but the height of the building also plays into that as well. And so we were really able to limit the height of the building and still park to code by having that shared parking opportunity.
Thank you.
What percentage of the parking is not within the structure, like the around the building surrounding?
So we're going to provide 460 parking spaces inside the structure, and then 82 are in the shared parking agreement. So whatever that percentage is, a very high percentage, 82 units will be in the shared parking with the Cube Spark area.
Great, thanks.
They will always have to check my math.
Do you have other questions about parking? We'll try and keep a theme here. Daryl?
Yeah, I was wondering, is the shared parking is basically what's used to increase the ratio to the UDC requirement? Are you changing the size of the garage at all?
So we are maximizing the garage as well. So we are adding some spots in the garage. If I remember, that's about 10 to 15 spots that were available. I think you're right that really the opportunity is in shared parking. And I have to be honest, that is an opportunity that's also good for the neighborhood, right? That's kind of a sea of parking that surrounds that. At any given time, and you probably saw from the studies, that storage facility uses 2 or 3 parking spaces. So this was something that we really thought, we'll also plan to put our guest parking there, which we think is great for the neighborhood because guests oftentimes go to street parking, but they will know this is designated for them. So we actually think it really helps the efficiency in the neighborhood as well.
In terms of the parking structure, have you looked at possible reuse of that? Is that something that you're looking at forward in building that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, again, we're trying to really limit the height of that, right? And if we were to park those 82, we'd have to go up a whole nother level. That would certainly change this, probably make it financially unfeasible. I think to your point, though, as you look at the changes with Uber and shared parking services and all the things we want to encourage, my guess is someday that we probably have a large facility there, parking facility, that probably gives us some opportunities as the rail trail and other things come along that we could probably enhance more pedestrian-related activities.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds.
No problem, let's do it.
Your draft agreement for parking between the two different,
Yes.
can you walk me through, it's number 8, I don't know. Anyway, it's the control and future development or redevelopment of the 2 parcels and how that would work if one of the parcels perhaps is sold to another entity and the joint parking agreement and that sort of thing. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, I'm going to transition here to one of the owners. The one thing I will say, though, I think inherently by our proposal, we're saying we have to park it to code, right? So most importantly, even if there was ownership changes, it still has to remain parked to code. So
I didn't see anything in there about recording of the documents, and that was my concern.
Perfect.
We are recording the parking easement agreement.
Okay.
That is the intention. And the reason it's marked draft is obviously we haven't had a chance to go through this in great detail with staff to understand what tweaks or modifications we need to
Right, I
incorporate into it.
sort of skimmed through it because it was marked draft, so.
Yep. But yeah, no, that is the intent. But to Marcus's point, I think the PUD district plan requires that development to be parked to code regardless of how it accommodates that.
Okay, because there's basically, I mean, if this is approved, it's basically 3 different uses that are being, for this entire property. And so my concern was, is this language addressing all of that potential, if it could be 3 different owners down the road?
Sure, and this would survive transfer of property ownership.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Parking question or something else?
Something else,
Okay. Go ahead.
if I can remember now. Yeah, I had a question in terms of the access to the Hamden City Center, Inglewood Station area. I mean, that's a huge barrier there getting across Hamden. Obviously, the long-term solution is the rail trail, and that will provide ideal access. I may have missed it, but did you look at making that connection better to get pedestrians, from your apartment complex over to the Inglewood?
Yeah, sir, and a couple of specific recommendations we had in the multimodal study, particularly were transitioning pedestrians right to Hamden. One was the crosswalk improvements on South Jason and South Inca, actually to allow that because you cross the street to then go across Hampton. I think we're also working with the city on some of those things. As you may recall from last time, we're also working with the transit or the shuttle, the Inglewood shuttle, to see if that's a possibility to extend across it. But we completely agree with you. We think that's an important piece of that. That was probably the foundational element, was looking at that 0.4 miles. How do we get pedestrians better to the Inglewood station? So we had a number of specific improvements in the multimodal study.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to see that. I think that is the most important issue, and I just want to commend you guys for your diligence, and the community process is really outstanding. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions about multimodal access? Okay, go back to it if we need to. I have a question about the permitted uses.
Okay.
There was a couple of them that I'm just wondering if you can tell us how they would enhance the character of the area. I was looking at the check cashing facilities as well as drive-through restaurant. Check cashing in terms of enhancing the character of the area, and the drive-through as well in terms of, thinking about the walking and biking aspect and all of that.
So I think, and I'll be careful about this answer, I think the challenge of this is those are all uses that are allowed today, right? They're in the underlying zone district, and actually there's probably even more egregious uses than that allowed. So I think what we wanted to do is to streamline the uses where it allowed, and really all of our narrative and all of those things we're talking about, compliance with the comprehensive plan, is based on that multifamily use. So I'm probably not arguing at all that that's really enhancing the pedestrian realm or any of those things. I think we had to keep some of those other uses in here in the 1 in 1 million chance that we don't move forward with the multifamily, or otherwise we've created a PUD zoning that doesn't allow anything else but multifamily. Sure. And we've effectively taken away their underlying zoning. So that's why those other uses are in there. We've tried to limit them. One thing I want to say is that we'd have to come back through that process, right? If that were to happen, we don't move forward with the multifamily, we'd have to come back through that process and basically start all over again.
Michelle, did you have a question?
I have a couple. I noticed in your landscaping plan that the contractor shall furnish a 1-year maintenance and warranty of the landscaping that is put in place. And this may be a question actually for staff rather than you. Is there a commitment to maintain that landscaping beyond the warranty?
Yes. The owner of the building will maintain and keep that landscaping alive. And I think, Reed, I don't know.
Is that part of the
It's
requirement by the city, or?
Don't you guys have a standard note that says we have to keep everything alive in perpetuity, basically? Most jurisdictions do. But I will tell you that most multifamily developers, like every single one that I work with, and I work with a lot of them, they're going to take care of that investment because the landscape areas, the amenity areas are really important to their residents. Right. And so they will maintain it. They have maintenance people typically employed that are on site every single day. So they will continue to take care of the landscape and take care of the maintenance of those areas.
The part of the reason I asked that question has no relation to you and your PUD, but the Chick-fil-A that went up on Dartmouth and Broadway, most of their trees are dead. I hate to say it, or almost dead. And so I don't want to see, approve a PUD where we don't have a commitment that this is going to be, have a street attractiveness or.
So I think the one important thing to remember is that this is going to be people's homes where they go
Right.
to every day.
Right.
And people aren't, and it's really important for whoever owns this and Wood's going to own it, after they build it, that they need to have curb appeal and to want people to come and live in their residential units.
Well,
And-
that's the common sense approach, but
Yeah. You're like,
not everybody uses
that
common
out.
sense.
I know, but I will tell you that it is an important thing from a marketing perspective for them. That's what gets people there, and it's going to matter because it tells them it's the first thing that people see. They see the landscape, they see the outdoor space, they see what the outside of the building looks like. They see all of those things, and I think it matters to people because they care about the places that they live. That if it's not taken care of, it's going to be a huge problem for them. So I would say that they're going to continue to maintain that landscaping because
Okay.
it's important to the project.
Yeah, I mean, your curb appeal is important, obviously, for people, anybody that deals with real estate knows
Right,
that
and
curb
if they,
appeal is very
if
important.
they don't, I'm going to tell them that they need to
Right,
because
right.
it reflects on us as, we care a lot about these projects because they do reflect on us as designers, and it matters that we create these great spaces for people, and that's where they're going to live, and those are their homes. And so, I go by projects all the time that I work on, and I call people and say, hey, you need to go and fix that or make that better because it
Yeah,
does.
I'm about ready to go talk to the Chick-fil-A manager, so.
You should do that.
But that's because
So-
I live off of Dartmouth, I go up and down that street all the time.
So, do you have any other landscape questions?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
have just a question on, it said from the Norris design that the Harris Cochner Smith is currently evaluating the impacts of pedestrian traffic. Has that been moved further along, or?
Yep, please. Oh, we got to swear somebody else in, sorry.
Yeah, we get a new person, yay.
Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission? Please state your name and address.
Michael Moore, Harris Coker Smith, 1120 Lincoln, Suite 1000, Denver, Colorado. Good evening, Commissioners. Ahead of these hearings, we had these DRT meetings, and in the most recent one, we had some conversations with the traffic staff based on some of the comments we've heard at Planning Commission and at hearings, and we've kind of re-engaged with the transportation staff to basically provide more traffic analysis, pedestrian analysis, those kind of things, and it's really a work in progress. It really did come up 10 days ago, but we are very openly working with transportation staff to look at pedestrian crossings, signal timing, anything that we can do on our end as a part of the development to support the multimodal study and what we agreed to in that report, and also identify, other potential means to mitigate things, and we're having a very open dialogue with city transportation staff on those items right now.
Because that's a really busy stretch of Hampton. There's lights like every second block. And if there are a lot of pedestrians crossing, it could really block traffic up a lot. And I don't know how the timing could be worked out to make things better, but I guess it's just a comment on my part, not that I'm going to say no to anything, but it's a very, very constricted part of Hampton. It's very busy.
Sure, yeah, and I drive it quite a bit. I actually live down Hamden at Sheridan, so I drive it a lot. It's one of those things where the traffic volume today obviously is onerous on that entire stretch.
And there's no room to widen that. I mean, there's just, like you'd have to wipe out the Burger King and all these other
Right,
things.
and rebuild the Santa Fe Bridge.
Right,
and
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a seriously complicated issue from a traffic standpoint. And we recognize that, we're coming in, we're part of the development of the area, and we're trying to, respect you guys and work with transportation staff to kind of do what we can. There's pretty limited means to do a whole lot, but we're, open ears and trying to work with your guys' staff to find some
Unless
solutions.
Daryl mentioned the bridges over the little trail, that's an important part down the road, perhaps.
Right, that's the ultimate solution, but right now, you can't even get across. I mean, people that, work in this building don't even want to go across to the Burger King. I mean, it's it's a bad situation.
Gotta hoof it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're working with them to do what we can. And,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you very
sure.
much.
Question on signage. Give some additional reasoning on the increase in ratio of sign per building frontage.
So the signage issue we actually discussed today, and I know it was mentioned in the staff report. The challenge here is there's a multifamily signage code, right, that you're all familiar with, or equivalents, like what you get out of that for multifamily, and then actually what's allowed today, right, in the industrial use. So what we're doing and what we're asking for is, I know it came up with some very large numbers. I think it said something like 700 square feet, and people think of that as a very large sign. We would have a comprehensive sign package on this site, and just as a comparison, another property that we developed, the Bell Station just down the way, that had about 350 square feet of total signage. So all the different signs involved in that, that's what we reach there. So I don't think in any way that we're suggesting that we're going to go to 700 square feet for signage. What that is that's an indicative of the code. It's just a conversion of that. So we're asking for that in the PD. One thing I want to say is we're not making any change on the signage from what was in the original package. We're not trying to increase that. That is just a factor of the math. We certainly won't go to that, and we'll work very closely with staff to limit that. Yep, please.
I just want to make a distinction. The signage square footage that Marcus just referred to is for building signage. So if there's a monument sign, it would add some additional square footage. So, but it would still be under that 700. But I think the biggest thing is it's not going to be one big, gigantic billboard.
Okay.
It's going to be, it would be a comprehensive sign package, and we did do that on Cherry Hills, and I think it turned out really well. So, but that's the idea. But I just wanted to be clear. It's going to be, if there is a monument sign, there would be additional signage. So.
I just have one further comment. I am so pleased that you came back through. I think a lot of our original questions, and mine was the big parking thing. I don't know if you remember me for that, but, and I think you've addressed it, and you've addressed many of our concerns, and I really appreciate your dedication to this project. It's not inexpensive to go back and redo this stuff. And I just want to let you know that I appreciate it, and I think you've done a good job. I'll be interested to hear what the citizens might say, but personally, I think you've done a really good job.
Thank you very much.
Do you have any other questions for the applicant at this time? Carolyn?
Sort of back to my parks comment about park space. What's the vision for the courtyards beyond the pool?
Sure.
The vision beyond courtyard. I didn't hear.
Beyond
Okay.
the pool.
So we'll have a dog park area most likely, so that people in Colorado have dogs and pets, and we'll allow pets in this project, which is great since I have 2 dogs. But we'll also have other seating areas. The whole urban streetscape is going to be designed as well, so that's part of the whole landscaping question that you asked. Is that all going to be taken care of? Yeah, because we'll have plaza area out front and probably some benches and planters and those types of things. So, and part of the the pool and amenity area will probably include an outdoor kitchen and grill and great spaces for people to be outdoors and recreate at their homes, just in a common space that we design many of them, and they're pretty cool. So anyways.
Is it primarily designed for adult use, or will it be suitable for because there will be some families living there with children, one would assume?
Possibly, yes. There will not be a playground in the pool area, but there will be, kids will be allowed in the pool, because you're probably not going to keep them out of there. The dogs won't be allowed in the pool though. So, but yeah, those areas are typically family friendly, because you can, families cook together. They can barbecue outside together in the outdoor kitchen spaces. So, and when the pool's open and available and people want to go for a swim, kids would be able to do that too.
This may be a question for you or for staff. I think I ask this every time. But any additional background information on I'm looking at the value of property per acre recommended to use for the park in lieu, for the fee in lieu for the park's dedication.
That's definitely agreed.
Background with regard to how did we get there? There is a per unit cost that we apply to all residential developments of $385 per unit. Or that's if you cannot provide open space on your property. Our open space standard is not workable for our urban environment. It's a rural calculation, to where when we calculate what would be required to be provided in terms of open space, it comes up to more acreage than what they even have. So this development would have needed to provide, I think, a little over 5 acres of open space, and they only have 4.22. So then we have the option in the code that falls back on this payment in lieu, and that's figured based on the $388 per unit calculation. The Parks and Rec Board actually set that number, and the Community Development Department created that policy that that's what we would charge. So that's how we came up with that number.
For here, unless I'm not following it, has also a value of $20,000 per acre, that it was also calculated that way. Is there a way that we came up with the $20,000 per acre calculation? Okay. So slightly less than the cost of building one parking space? Thank you.
For height reference, I was wondering if you could tell me how tall the new police station is that's right, like 2 blocks away. Okay. It's pretty tall. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the staff or applicant at this time? Go ahead. Yep. Oh.
Thank you. Chick-fil-A's in trouble. I actually work part-time for a tree company, so I'm really into trees. Yeah. Yeah, most jurisdictions do, so thank you, Wendy. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to public testimony. So this is an opportunity for public to provide testimony regarding this case. All comments should be directed towards the commission, and the commission has established a 5-minute limit on speaking time. So we have so far one person signed up, Kurt Holberg. So if you want to come forward, and we'll swear you in.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that you will tell the truth in this proceeding before the Planning and Zoning Commission?
I'm just trying to make
you, Kurt. Any questions, for Kurt? Thank you very much. Is there anyone that hasn't signed up would also like to provide public testimony? Okay. Does the applicant want to provide any sort of rebuttal or response to the pay parking comment?
Just briefly, we'll say, and I'm with Mr. Holbert, he's actually been a remarkable participant. We've met with him on, he and his brother on multiple occasions. I think frankly they've really improved this project. This is why one of the main reasons we went together. As to his comment about the paid parking, I just want to clarify, we're not arguing over that. The parking is already included in your rent. So I think you are paying for that, but it's included in that. One thing that I will say though is the fail-safe protection for the neighborhood on that is not allowed in the agreement with that. Because if they're not parking in the garage and it's not allowed on adjacent streets, then they have to do something, right? They're going to park in the structure. So that's why we support those. We don't want our residents parking on the street. We absolutely believe that we should have available parking for these businesses. So just saying that we can't control that, but that's an important factor for us as well. With all of that, again, certainly appreciate your support.
Yes, this is kind of our last call for any, for any questions for staff or the applicant.
Thanks. Regarding the parking for one spot per unit, so that means a studio is only going to get one spot and a 3-bedroom is only getting one spot. So if somebody moved in, like these millennials are talking about having roommates, they still only get one spot and the other roommates are going to have to pay for parking.
It's actually a little more nuanced than that because we had a chart that actually studio and 1 and 2 bedrooms require 1.5 parking spots. I think 3 bedrooms require 2 parking spots. So it's to your code. So there is a little tailoring, if you will, with that. I think the other thing is, and I'm not arguing with your point at all, is that's how these work though, and we're able to kind of tailor that, particularly to millennials and so forth, frankly, usually have less cars and really will use the transit opportunities. So I think we balance that, but we are absolutely parking to code. We also provide one parking spot for guests, one per drive units for guests. And again, that's on the street level, because we think that's who offends or parks of the neighborhood more often are guests coming to the site. So that's why we wanted to provide surface access for those guests.
To kind of add on to that question, will parking be assigned for units? So kind of what Adam was saying, for a 2-bedroom, will they get 2 units that they don't have to pay an additional fee for that second space?
That's a discussion we've had, and yes, that's how we're looking at it. If it's a 2-bedroom, right, or 2 parking spots required, that would be included in the rent. So
Okay.
I think that's easier to do it that way. And again, those aren't like spot A, right? I mean, it's generally the building garage.
Okay, thanks.
All right, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
Sure, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Did we get a second?
Second.
Okay.
Mr. Kenton?
Aye.
Ms. Austin?
Aye.
Ms. Marshall?
Aye.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Willis?
Aye.
Ms. Fuller?
Aye.
And Chair Townley?
Yes. Okay, and then do we have a motion, a recommendation on this case?
Go, Daryl.
Well, I don't know if we're going to have a little discussion, but I think, you know, a couple of things. Let me just take this off.
I think we need to put a motion on the table,
Put a motion on the table.
Okay, we need to put,
have discussion.
okay. Well, then I will propose that we put that motion on the table.
Second.
Can you tell me what the motion is?
The motion is that we move this forward.
I'm looking to see how it was written in our report, if you would like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now the motion on the table is to approve as written,
Yes.
and so we can open this up to discussion. And I also wanted to remind my fellow commissioners that we have kind of a worksheet guideline, or guideline kind of worksheet that can help if you want to be looking at that as well. Gerald, you want to kick us off with any discussion?
Yeah, I think, a couple of issues that were brought up, our public commenter made a good point that, that if changes were made as it stands now, they would not have to come back to the table. I'm wondering if we should add an amendment to change that. In other words, say that if something, those types of changes are made, that it must come back to the table.
Oh, I thought you were looking at me. Any other discussion on, or any discussion on that?
That would make me very comfortable to have it come back if there are substantive changes like that.
This is a question, I guess, or clarification for staff. If they change parking, it would no longer meet the code, so it would have to come back, correct? So is an amendment necessary?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were talking about parking. I apologize.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's what he wanted.
That's the question, yeah. Okay.
So I have a question for staff as well. So as I go through this worksheet, the proposed development would not be allowed or allowed or practicable under standard district because this is industrial, correct? So multifamily is not allowed. Okay, so we would meet that criteria because of that. Okay.
And just to clarify on that a little bit further, that this does not qualify for a regular district rezoning because it's not adjacent to different districts.
It's not adjacent to a residential district. Okay, it's surrounded by industrial. Okay, got it.
Okay, so the first item that Daryl brought up was talking about the uses, or how we would want to, I guess, add to, let's see, there was a list of items that would require this to come back, if those were changed, and if we would want to add something to that. Sorry, where we have that. There's a lot of paper. So, from the report from the applicant on page 9, this is actually a modification and amendment of the site improvement plan. So, is there a way to add something in here that would... Sure. Page 7 in the staff report. Okay. We have information in here on the PU district plan and items that, if they were to change, would require this to come back to planning and zoning or to city council. So that could be an opportunity in there if you wanted to add something as well around certain uses, or are you looking to do that somewhere?
No, I think that would make the most sense, is to add it there.
I agree.
Can you clarify for me what we're adding?
We're adding if to the fact if the use changes, that it would have to come back
Use changes from
from
what?
from apartments.
From
Multifamily.
family.
Yeah.
That's not a site development thing, that's a, right? Or, I mean, we're talking about approving a district
Right.
plan, not a site plan.
Right, but they've already said there's a bunch of things that we're mentioning that would come back to us for. We're just adding one more thing.
I just don't know.
Wade, did you want to address
Still
that?
don't, sure.
So right now, the site development plan is only related to the multifamily use. And if they chose to do any other kind of use, they don't even need to submit a site development plan per the PUD.
So it's not going to be a giant pot thing or something, is I guess, you know.
That's already not a
commune.
permitted use,
Yeah.
but we do have a list of permitted uses.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So if they put an ATM in the lobby, they would have to come back? Is that what you're saying? No. Okay. Okay, because that would be silly. Okay, all right.
So if they had to submit a site plan for another use, it would violate all of these deviations would then kick in because they wouldn't have 316 units. Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
increase.
Okay.
So I do, it does sound like there's a need for to adding this then, you know. I don't see any harm in it, and it's only of benefit to make sure that it comes back if there's that kind of change. They have no intention of making that kind of change, but I think it's wise to add it.
I don't mean to be dense, but I'm still not clear what we're asking for. They already have the right to all the uses in the PUD, so if we're approving the district plan and the uses in the PUD, why would they have to come back to us?
If
Why would we ask them to if we're not going to approve the uses in the PUD? Then why did we do it to begin with? I guess I'm just very confused about this right now. Am I being dense?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think maybe I misunderstood our public commenter. His concern was that the use could change and it wouldn't have to come back before us. That's what we're trying to change.
And the use right now, as it's zoned, could be all of the things that are in
Right.
the permitted use but multifamily. So it's that question of would it need to come back to us? It wouldn't come before us typically if it was one of those uses.
Only if
I don't know why we would require
if
it.
it remains a PUD. I mean, it wouldn't have to come back before us if they just go the existing zoning. That's a different
No,
situation.
but remember, our PUD district plan includes all of those uses. All that part we went over in the last public hearing. So it
Right.
already includes that.
But I don't think we want to approve a PUD that would include that. Going back to the existing use by right is a different thing to me than that. Like I said, I think he has a point. I think it's easy to add. There's a few other things that I'd rather move on to, but that's my point.
Zoning. Yeah. Yeah. A PUD is basically a new zoning of that particular property, or part of that property.
I would be open to restricting a couple more of the uses, the check cashing and the drive-through, because I don't think they would enhance the character of this is a PUD. We have the opportunity to enhance the character of the area. I don't see how adding an additional drive-through restaurant or something like that is going to help with walking, biking. So
Right.
those would be two I could see recommending removing as permitted uses.
I would certainly support that.
But there are those places like Starbucks who have the drive-through that people are drawn to, and so that would eliminate that aspect. Because I know there are people that would much rather
Sure.
be on their way to work rather than walk in.
I could definitely see that, although there is concerns already about traffic generation, congestion, that sort of thing. So if we're allowing that use, is it helping with any of that?
So I think, we should consider that as do you want to specify a specific amendment to that, along the lines of what you,
I would say that to strike the cash checking and also the drive-through restaurant from permitted uses would be my recommendation to amend. Any discussion on that?
Back to, I feel, and this is only because we already approved all of that. And I know we can always rediscuss, but for people who were not at the first hearing, they don't even have the list of uses. They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just want to make sure that we're not rehearing the first hearing. That's all.
I think we have the opportunity to do that, though. I mean, we have the opportunity to make whatever recommendations and also respond to questions from council. So, any other thoughts on that amendment?
I think
Sounded
that,
like Adam was not for that. So it's
I'm totally for it, yeah. I just think when you eliminate something so broad as that, it's going to eliminate some other people that maybe have a new concept.
okay.
But, no, I'm all for it, yeah.
Maybe making it fast food drive-through? I'm not sure if some other companies have found, or, we already have enough fast food drive-through right there within walking distance in that neighborhood.
Don't know if we have that
Yeah.
as an actual called out use, so.
I would support any drive-through. I mean, obviously, as we've talked about many times tonight, Hamden is already a nightmare. I don't think we need any drive-throughs along there.
So, let's see. I might need help procedurally if we want to make that amendment to then do a vote on that amendment.
You have to amend your original motion.
Mm-hmm.
So you vote on your amendment, and then you go back and vote on the original motion.
And then we can continue to amend as we do these votes.
It's
Yeah.
best to,
Go
seriously,
through discussion first and then,
it's easier, correct me if I'm wrong, city attorney, it is easier to get all your amendments lined up
Mhm.
first.
Okay. Thank you.
And do one amendment.
Okay.
You can approve or approve with conditions, or deny or modify. So you want to make sure you've got everything. Whatever conditions you're laying on it, or whatever modifications you're making, make sure they're all in one vote.
Okay. Thank you. And drive. Okay.
I have an addition to the amendment, unrelated, but it's both I believe staff and the applicant said that they would be amenable to a parking restriction on the street, no overnight parking. I think that would be very beneficial to avoid the type of situation that many are concerned about.
So explore
No,
overnight
I mean,
parking
actually,
restrictions?
I think recommend specifically no overnight parking on the street, no overnight street parking. Enforcement is an issue.
I'm just wondering with that, if there is an opportunity, I was trying to think if they had the exact language in here, but to like amend that parking plan, so whether it's no overnight parking or whatever restrictions make sense, if we're to determine those right now, or whether it's 2-hour parking or what it is, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to expand that a little bit, so no, it's not just no overnight parking.
At this point, I would not support that, just because it is an industrial district, and there's a lot of semis that come in and might need to park overnight for loading and unloading and that sort of thing. I would rather let that go for now, and if it becomes an issue for the people who own other businesses in the area, that they come back and they ask for that sort of restriction down the road. I just think there's might be some unintended consequences that we're not really aware of. Which blocks, you mean?
Yeah, I would agree. I don't see any reason to be specific. I think, you know, what we want to avoid is what we ended up with at Oxford Station, which I do drive by on a daily basis, and there is quite a bit of overflow, overnight restriction parking that was not there before the apartments were there. And I think we want to do what we can to avoid that situation.
Okay. Do you want to make a recommendation then of what amendment you'd like, so then we can?
I would say that the amendment would be to add some type of street parking restriction that will strongly discourage any overflow parking from the development.
Question on that?
Oh, good.
Obviously, we're going to be working through all the stuff in the site plan approval process. Basically, what streets and what restrictions we have to do will be subject to no discretion. So, we're, you know, obviously we have to advise them, but certainly we're going to go through that. I think that's something we're going to have to figure out what streets and what's the best way to do that. So, we'll work through that as we go through the process. We're looking at it. Right. That's why it's an amendment just for street parking rather than specific. Yeah.
Thank you. You want to change that based on his comment or anything?
Well, like I said, I think just, you know, some type of restriction for street parking without, you know, specifying any specifics. I think, you know, that would be adequate.
I would like to suggest that we just add in language or a recommendation working with the city traffic engineer to develop, you know, whatever necessary parking restrictions there would be. I'm trying to keep a record of these. Any other comments or anything on that? Questions? Okay. Let's see. Any other amendments or requests?
I think this is already, I think this is only a matter of codifying it, but I think we should encourage the developer to do what they can, whatever that might be. And this would be, you know, cities up to obviously city council discretion to move forward the connection, the Hamden Rail Trail Bridge and Oxford Bridge and so forth. So like I said, I don't think we should get into specifics because I think it's, that would be council's discretion, but I think that's something that should be looked at.
So it would be a matter of prioritizing that rail trail bridge or the rail trail in general in terms of additional multimodal improvements?
Yeah, and you know, what type of, you know, when I asked staff about it earlier, they said, you know, they did not have, you know, they could not make a specific ask, but city council can. So I think, you know, I think that's something that they should look at.
I think one of the things that seemed beneficial for other sections of the rail trail was to have 30% design document or something then that the, you know, could help look at what alignment is, whether the access point on the PUD makes sense for the rail trail alignment, and also to seek additional funds. So I don't know if that's something that there could be help with in coming up with some sort of design or plan like that.
If I recall correctly, I thought that John was trying to look for grants for that. Am I wrong?
I think there's different sections of it, so. In order to receive some grants for construction, you often have to have a certain percent
Milestones
design,
met.
yeah, completed. Any other discussion or comments on rail trail pieces or Hamden Bridge? Nope. Alright. Any other discussion in terms or ideas for amendments, additional recommendations, anything like that? Okay, so right now we have 3 recommended, I don't know how we would want to, conditions or items for city council to consider as they're looking at PUD. And that would be, I'm just recapping here, to make a change to the list of permitted uses to eliminate drive-through and check cashing. The second one is to continue working with the city traffic engineer on on-street parking restrictions.
I have a procedural question,
Yeah.
because I'm still confused. So we're approving the PUD. I'm not sure how the recommendations are related to the approval of the PUD. Can you explain that?
Sure.
Especially when we're asking council to do something unrelated to the developers. They don't have any control over that.
I would say with this, we can make a recommendation to city council to approve the PUD or this district plan as it's written here. We can also make recommendations for additional things that they can consider. So these
The developer or the council?
it would be, this is our recommendation to city council for things that, to work with the developer on.
But they don't have any control over the on-street parking or the rail trail. The developer doesn't.
But as a condition of that PUD, we could recommend that they continue to look at that.
The city council?
Could be both.
Okay. I'm still, okay. I'm just confused.
Anyone
I
wanna-
don't see how the developer has any control over that. Right. Right. Right, approval. Mm-hmm. Right.
if you agree to that. And one of those conditions is to remove.
That I get, yep.
Okay, and then to work with the traffic engineer on on-street parking conditions, and I'm still confused on the next piece as well.
Still getting there.
So whether you're requiring them to, I don't even know that.
For which one? The ones that we've already,
You're requiring them to,
I think that's what we still need to, that's what I was saying. I need clarification on that one too. So there can be things that are within the site of the PUD, and then also how that PUD can impact the surrounding area. So same with, improving crosswalks, improving connectivity to other places. It's not necessarily on that site, but it can be impacted by the developer or that relationship with the city as this moves forward. So I think with things like the on-street parking, it may not be up to the developer to, enforce that. It's going to be up to the city to enforce that, but as an overall parking plan and to, respond to residents in the area and what their concerns are, it could be, a step to mitigate any of those concerns.
Still won't ever get the logic. I'm on board.
Okay. So the third one is thinking about the rail trail, and if there's anything additional we would want to recommend that city council asks for.
I think, yeah, city council should just, how, like I said, it's their purview to decide if they want to ask something of the developer to help that process and what that might be. I don't think that's for us to specify, but I think that's something that they should look at as a win-win for the developer and the city.
So right now, they, the applicant stated that for their park, their fee in lieu for park dedication, that there's a good chance that that would go towards rail trail type activity. Is there something in addition to that that you are looking for?
No, I mean, something like that, I mean, we could specify, I mean, that could certainly be part of it. I just think, as our recommendation to the city council, this is something that should definitely be included as part of the recommendation. And that's just for them to look at it and like how far they want to go with it. If they just want to say, hey, we really want to have an emphasis to this, or we want something specific, I think that's, for city council to determine. Sure.
They also have the section that's the multimodal improvements too, so that can be for what they want to with the streets. Yeah, I think what he said is great.
I think that would be good, and that we make some sort of recommendation to show that they should prioritize that funding to go towards the rail trail. I just think we'd want to put a little caveat in there in the event somehow the city gets additional funding or some other sources, that there is still that flexibility. So that we'd prioritize rail trail improvements because that would improve multimodal connections, but that there would also be flexibility if for some reason that funding came from somewhere else.
This was several weeks ago, but when we
Make sure you use the mic.
when we looked at that, are they starting from the south and moving north, or are they starting at Hamden and going south? Because for some reason, I'm thinking that they're going to be starting at Oxford and that area. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's going to be even. So away from this development.
Mm-hmm. So our third amendment, it sounds like, is to or excuse me, not, our third recommendation or condition is that they prioritize the fee in lieu, or the park dedication fee, to go towards the rail trail improvements. Is that clear, Nancy?
But can we say specifically towards this block of rail trail? Because if they take this 121 and then apply it to Oxford down south, it's going to have no effect on this whatsoever.
Yeah, we could say that, yeah, adjacent or connected to that property.
Yeah, Oxford.
Okay, so. No, that's, okay. We're just going to take a 5-minute break, or a couple minutes. I think we recommend this money is set aside for, unless there's other funding that comes available. That was the only thing, if we're not making some sort of, making it more sticky than it needs to be, but we'd like to prioritize that project with that funding. For that section of the trail next to the property.
Between Oxford and Hamden, because there would be no sense in that 121 going south of Oxford.
So adjacent to.
Adjacent to, yes.
Hampton.
Hampton, thank you.
Okay. Daryl, would you like to make the amendment to the motion to include those?
All three of those things. Let's see if I can remember. Okay. So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
I'm sorry. No, the words question is what I have to actually state. We've had a first and a second on the original motion, but we have not voted. We've talked around the amendment.
Um,
So Mr. Kennedy, this is a friendly amendment. Do we have a second to Ms. Miller? Accept the friendly amendment.
yes.
Does everybody understand what they're ready to vote on?
Yes.
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 I think it could be good just for the record to repeat,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
What I have is planning commission is recommending that city council approve PUD for case ZON 2017-004 Alta Inglewood Station Planned Unit Development District Plan with the following conditions. Flying by the seat of my pants here. To remove from the
Permitted uses.
allowed uses, well, I'll call it more technical, drive-through restaurants and check cashing. Work with City of Inglewood traffic engineer on on-street parking restrictions. Number 3, prioritize the fee in lieu or /park dedication for rail trail improvements on the section between Oxford and Hampton. I would caution you only on this point. You're voting on all three conditions. Just be aware. So if one of you disagrees with one section of this, you're voting against all three. Okay? There's no way to split them unless you take them individually. So just wanted to be aware of that. It goes as one motion, okay?
One small detail. Oxford and Hamden, the only concern I have about that is that if, does that include a bridge over Hamden?
What I heard was prioritize the park dedication fee for rail trail improvements on the section between Oxford and Hamden. I did not hear anything
'Cause-
in the trail, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, because I think that's the connection you were talking about.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if we need to be more specific, then I feel like maybe we do need to say to Inglewood Station.
Yeah.
Because yes, you're right, it would just stop at Hamden. But then again, it's going to still be providing money towards that block rather than going south of Oxford, which I think is my concern. I just don't want their money to be going to something that's not going to benefit them.
So are we talking about a bridge or are we talking about a?
Well, the trail is going to include the bridge, essentially at some point, correct?
Not
Not-
from Hampton South.
Okay. Right, okay.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, I do think that would be a worthwhile change because but as long as it's out, it's ultimately city council's decision, so they're gonna, they can tweak it the way they want.
Do you want to change it to include connections to Inglewood Station?
Yes, I would like to change that. Thank you.
Prioritize fee and lieu / park dedication fee for rail trail improvements.
Can we say directly benefit this property and leave it at that? Rail trail improvements that directly benefit this property. Does that make it specific and broad enough?
You want to say adjacent to and including the bridge over Hampton.
There's no bridge over Hampton.
Oh, not part of the rail. Oh.
I think connecting my thought would be, because there's, things that are directly connected to that site versus things that can benefit that site, which could be broader. So that's also up for interpretation. But I think if we could, one of the purposes of the rail trail is to be able to connect people to those stations. So I think if we can narrow it down somewhat to the section of the trail that is either between those two stations.
I mean, I'd be fine with just say have it go to the rail trail, period, and not. I understand what he was trying to get at and make sure it wasn't going south, but I think that's less of an issue. I mean, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of the total cost. I mean, as long as it's going towards the rail trail, I think that'd be fine. I mean, if council wants to get more specific, they can.
Thoughts on that? Because I don't want to get hung up on disagreement on that. So you want to keep it more broad, just to the rail trail. Okay.
Oh, it's 100% okay with me, yes.
That's okay?
Yes, because it is a drop in the bucket.
So it's more broad, just to the rail trail.
State it again, prioritize fee and lieu / park dedication fee
To the rail trail.
to the rail trail. To the rail trail connection? Or just to the rail trail? Okay.
So with this vote, this is our vote to make our recommendation to approve or not approve. So we want to just want to remind the commissioners that you'll want to cast your reasonings, find your vote, and where it supports the comprehensive plan, those types of things. So we can prepare our findings of fact for later on.
As a reminder, you've got the mics out for you right now.
Okay.
Sarah, were you calling for the vote? Mr. Kenton?
I vote affirmative, for the reasons of supporting the comprehensive plan, for providing a diversity of housing types and encouraging transportation. And I'm just sorry I don't have the specifics, but that's the general. Thank you.
Or clarification, are we just voting and we're going to do findings of fact later, or? Okay, I vote yes, because the proposed development would not be allowed or practicable under a standard zone district with conditional uses or with reasonable number of zoning variances or administrative adjustments. Yes, because it includes a multifamily use. I also would like to cite that the application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and title, and the application is in compliance with the goals, objectives, and policies of the city.
Ms. Marshall?
I vote yes because for the reasons that Ms. Austin stated, and also because the applicant has made every effort to address the concerns of the City Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission and come up with reasonable and effective solutions.
Ms. Brown?
I vote yes. I commend the contractor and all of the developers and everyone that have worked with the applicant for the significant work they've done to improve the site and to answer the community questions. I appreciate your attendance here. I certainly appreciate the very detailed answers to the specific questions that the council presented. I also agree the application is consistent with our comprehensive plan and Title 16. The application is in conformance with adopted and generally accepted development standards and any other ordinance, law, or requirement of the city, and the application is substantially consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the city. That's all I got.
I vote yes because the applicants have worked with the neighborhood and the districts, and the resulting rezoned properties will not have significant negative impact on those properties surrounding these rezoned areas, and the general public health, safety, and welfare of the community will be protected.
I vote yes because this project should drive positive traffic to local businesses. It appears the applicant has worked with a lot of my neighbors to hear them and get their feedback and made careful plans. And also the proposed use is an improvement, in my opinion, compared to the existing zoning for the area, and will bring life to my neighborhood.
Chair Townley?
I vote yes. I appreciate the community engagement and the work that the applicant has done to work with community members, especially on parking issues and other concerns that have come up. I feel as though that the proposal definitely meets several goals of the comprehensive plan, and thank you for laying them out so nicely in this presentation, but definitely goals around creating that balance of different types of housing opportunities, improving our housing stock, having more opportunities for housing for people that work in the area, Also improving multimodal connections and opportunities to be able to get in and out of Inglewood as well as around Inglewood without having to use a car. And the opportunities to enhance our trail system as well. I believe that the application definitely meets the needs of the UDC. I do just want to, just for our findings, and state for some of the questions from City Council that do not feel as though Planning and Zoning waived any of the parking requirements, that per our code, and I have it written in here, 16-6-4B5 for PUDs, that the parking from the types of uses like multifamily is a guide, and that we can come up with our own parking requirements with the applicant for a PUD. So I don't feel as though we waived them by any means, and right now it's parked per what multifamily would be. I think we want to consider moving forward that we also have an Inglewood Light Rail Corridor plan that recommends on page 26 only one parking space per unit for this area. So right now, if we were to go by this plan that was adopted by City Council, we have an additional 226 parking spaces on this site, which, you know, at $23,000 per parking space is a lot of money going towards parking that could be going to other things in the community. So something to consider moving forward. Do realize, though, that we're still moving towards people using transit. We still have people using cars, so, but we want to still encourage less parking near transit stations. Let's see what else. I do appreciate the changes in the height limit, and I feel as though that will fit within the character of the area. Let's see, and the $60,000 in multimodal enhancements I think will be great for the area as well. Let's see. And I think I have touched on all the things that I wanted to mention.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay. Now I have to figure out which piece of paper has our agenda. Our agenda, back over here. Okay, we'll move on to staff's choice.
You can share mine with me if you want. It's probably somewhere in there.
Staff's choice, yes.
How could I have missed this?
Oh, sure.
How is that being publicized?
Facebook. Oh, and since it's basically on the planning commission, it'll be on iCompass, just like a regular meeting. It'll be posted on the boards, the bulletin boards.
Did we capture some emails from the previous meetings that we can also particular send an email out to those folks? Good. So we'll do that. Okay.
And then the following meeting is also starting at 6 o'clock? Attorney's choice? Commissioner's choice?
I did want to mention one thing. There was a meeting just before this one on alleys, which I have to admit I didn't think was that much of a priority. But after attending that meeting and seeing almost 100 people show up at a 5 o'clock meeting, I think that we'll be hearing about that, and I just wanted to mention that because it's definitely, there's definitely a lot of issues that affect us with that.
Especially after the snow and all the wetness.
Carolyn?
I want to say thank you to the staff for all the work that they put in on this PUD. Very helpful. And I want to second what Daryl has to say about the alley. Boy, that's going to be an issue.
I got
I don't think I have anything either. So thank you, and thanks for all your discussion tonight, and as we work our way through this, so thank you. We're adjourned.